I am 87 years old, and today I'm going to tell you something most people don't talk about. How a life full of love can slowly turn into complete loneliness. I live alone in Streeterville, Chicago. This big, beautiful house still stands the same, but everything inside it has changed. There was a time when this place felt alive. My husband was a wealthy man, and we had everything anyone could wish for: respect, comfort, happiness, and most importantly, each other. At 87, I often find myself sitting quietly, looking back at the life I once lived, a life that now feels like a distant dream. There was a time when everything around me felt complete, when every day carried a sense of warmth and purpose. I remember waking up in the mornings with a calm heart, knowing that I wasn't alone in this world. My days were filled with small moments that meant everything: shared smiles, soft conversations, and the comfort of simply having someone by my side. Life didn't feel heavy back then. It felt gentle, almost like it was moving at the perfect pace just for me. We lived in a beautiful part of Streeterville, Chicago, where the city lights would shine through our windows at night, making everything feel alive and full of energy. Our home wasn't just a place to live, it was a space filled with love, memories, and a deep sense of belonging. Every corner of that house had a story. Every room carried laughter that once echoed through the walls. I never realized at the time how precious those ordinary days were, how those simple routines would one day become the memories I would hold on to the most. My husband was the center of that life, the reason everything felt steady and secure. With him, even the quiet moments felt meaningful. We didn't need anything extraordinary to feel happy, because our happiness came from being together. Whether we were sitting in silence or talking for hours, there was always a sense of peace that surrounded us. I felt safe, cared for, and deeply loved in a way that is hard to describe in words. People around us often saw the comfort and luxury we lived in, but what truly made our life beautiful was not the wealth. It was the connection we shared. There was laughter that came easily, conversations that never felt forced, and a bond that made even the simplest days feel special. I didn't have to search for happiness. It was already there, quietly present in every moment we spent together. Even now, as I sit alone, I can still picture those days so clearly. The sunlight coming through the windows, the familiar sounds of a home filled with life, and the feeling that everything was exactly as it should be. It's strange how time changes everything, how something that once felt permanent can slowly fade into memory, leaving behind only a quiet reminder of what once was. There was a time when my life was surrounded by comfort and ease, a kind of life many people only dream about. Living in Streeterville, Chicago, everything around me reflected a sense of luxury and stability. Our home stood tall among the city's finest buildings, with large windows that overlooked the skyline and the calm waters nearby. Every morning, the sunlight would gently fill the rooms, and every evening, the city lights would glow like a beautiful painting outside our windows. It all felt so complete, so perfectly in place. Inside the house, everything was carefully chosen, from the furniture to the smallest details. Soft carpets under my feet, elegant decorations on the walls, and a quiet sense of sophistication in every corner. But it never felt overwhelming or distant. It felt warm, like a place where life was meant to be lived and shared. The kitchen was always full of life, meals prepared with care, and a table that was never just about food, but about togetherness. Even the simplest moments, like having tea in the afternoon or sitting by the window, felt special. My husband had worked hard to build this life for us, and he took pride in making sure we lived comfortably. He believed that life should be enjoyed, not just endured, and he made sure we experienced the best of it. We had everything we needed, and more than that, we had a sense of peace that made it all meaningful. There was no constant worry, no fear of uncertainty. Everything felt secure, stable, and calm. People who visited us often admired the way we lived. They would notice the beauty of the house, the elegance, the comfort, and the way everything seemed so perfect. But what they couldn't always see was the feeling behind it all. It wasn't just about expensive things or a luxurious lifestyle. It was about how those things became a part of our shared life. The house wasn't empty luxury. It was filled with moments, with conversations, with quiet happiness that made every day feel worthwhile. We moved through life with a sense of ease, where even ordinary days felt rich in their own way. There was always something to look forward to, something to enjoy, even if it was just spending time together in that peaceful environment. I never felt the need to ask for more, because I already had everything that mattered, wrapped in comfort, love, and a life that felt beautifully complete. Some of my most cherished memories come from the weekends we spent together, away from the busy rhythm of the city. No matter how occupied life became during the week, we always made it a point to leave everything behind for a little while and just be with each other. Those weekends felt like a small escape, a chance to breathe, to slow down, and to enjoy the kind of peace that is hard to find in everyday life. We would often plan our trips without much effort, sometimes deciding at the last moment. My husband would smile and say it was time to get away, and just like that, we would be on the road. The long drives were always my favorite part. Sitting beside him, watching the city slowly fade into open roads and quiet landscapes, I felt a deep sense of calm. We didn't always need to talk. Sometimes, the silence between us said more than words ever could. There were times we visited places like Lake Geneva in Wisconsin, where the air felt fresher and the world seemed softer. We would walk along the water, watching the gentle ripples, listening to the quiet sounds of nature around us. He would hold my hand, and in those moments, nothing else mattered. It wasn't about where we were. It was about being together, away from everything else. We stayed in beautiful hotels, places that felt peaceful and welcoming. The rooms were always comfortable, with soft lighting and a quiet atmosphere that made it easy to relax. In the evenings, we would sit by the window or go out for dinner, sharing simple conversations about life, about memories, about things that made us smile. There was no rush, no pressure, just a feeling of being completely present with each other. Every trip created memories that stayed with me, small details that I still remember clearly even now. The way he would look at me when I laughed, the way he made sure I was always comfortable, the quiet happiness that filled those moments. It wasn't just about travel or luxury. It was about the connection we shared, the way those weekends brought us closer every time. Looking back now, I realize those were not just trips. They were pieces of a life that felt full and meaningful. They were moments where time seemed to slow down, where everything felt right, where I never once felt alone, because I always had him beside me, making every journey feel like home. My husband was more than just the person I shared my life with. He was the reason my world felt steady and complete. In every stage of life, through every moment of joy or uncertainty, he stood beside me like a quiet strength I could always rely on. There was something about his presence that made everything feel easier. as if no matter what happened, I would never have to face it alone. His calm nature, his gentle way of speaking, and the way he understood me without needing many words created a bond that felt unbreakable. He had a way of making even the simplest days feel meaningful. Whether we were at home or out somewhere, there was always a sense of comfort when he was near. I never felt the need to explain myself too much, because he already knew. He could tell when I was tired, when I was happy, or when something was quietly bothering me. That kind of understanding is rare, and I didn't realize how precious it was until it became a memory. He wasn't just a provider or a successful man. He was kind, thoughtful, and deeply caring. He made sure I was always comfortable, always respected, always valued. Even in small gestures, his love was clear. The way he would ask if I needed anything, the way he would make time for me, no matter how busy he was, the way he would listen without distraction. These were the things that truly mattered, far more than anything money could ever provide. There was a sense of peace in our relationship that I have never been able to find again. With him, I felt safe in a way that is difficult to describe. It wasn't just physical safety, it was emotional. A feeling that my heart was in the right place, that I was exactly where I belonged. I didn't have to worry about being misunderstood or ignored. He saw me, he valued me, and he made sure I felt it every single day. We built our life together step by step, sharing responsibilities, making decisions, and supporting each other through everything. He never made me feel small, never made me feel alone, even in moments when life became difficult. Instead, he brought a quiet reassurance that everything would be okay. That belief became a part of me, something I carried in my heart because of him. Even now, when I sit in silence, I can still feel the echo of his presence in my life. The way he stood beside me, the way he made everything feel balanced, the way he filled my days with a sense of purpose and calm. Losing him didn't just take away a person, it took away the one who made my world feel whole. The day everything changed is a day I can never forget, no matter how much time passes. It began like any other day, quiet and ordinary, with no sign that my entire world was about to fall apart. There was no warning, no moment to prepare myself for what was coming. One moment, life felt stable and familiar, and the next, it felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. When I lost my husband, it didn't feel real at first. It was as if my mind refused to accept what my heart already knew. I kept expecting to see him walk through the door, to hear his voice in another room, to feel his presence beside me like I always had. But the silence that followed was different, heavier, filled with a kind of emptiness that I had never known before. The house, which once felt warm and full of life, suddenly became cold and unfamiliar. Every room reminded me of him. Every corner held a memory that now felt painful instead of comforting. The chair where he used to sit, the places where we shared quiet moments, even the smallest details began to carry a weight that was difficult to bear. I would walk through the house and feel as though something essential was missing, something that could never be replaced. Grief settled in slowly, but deeply. It wasn't just about missing him, it was about losing the sense of balance he brought into my life. Without him, everything felt uncertain. The days became longer, the nights even harder. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was often interrupted by memories that refused to fade. I found myself waking up in the silence, realizing again and again that he was no longer there. People often say time heals, but in those moments, it didn't feel that way. Time only made me more aware of his absence, more aware of how much he had been a part of everything I knew. The routine we had built together was gone, and I was left trying to understand how to move forward without him. Even the simplest things felt different, as if life had lost its natural rhythm. There was a kind of loneliness that settled into my heart, one that I had never experienced before. It wasn't just about being alone physically. It was about feeling disconnected from the life I once had. The world outside continued as usual, but inside everything had changed. I was no longer the same person, because the person who had stood beside me through everything was gone, leaving behind a silence that no words could ever fill. After he was gone, the house began to feel different in ways I had never imagined. It was still the same place, with the same walls, the same furniture, the same view from the windows, but something inside it had changed completely. What once felt warm and full of life slowly turned into a space filled with silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It was heavy, almost suffocating, as if every corner was quietly reminding me of what was missing. In the mornings, I would wake up and for a brief moment, everything felt normal. But then reality would return, and I would remember that I was alone. There was no one in the next room, no familiar voice calling out, no shared routine to begin the day. Even the simple act of making tea or sitting at the table felt different, because it was no longer something we did together. The absence of those small shared moments made the emptiness feel even deeper. As the days passed, the house seemed to grow quieter. The sounds that once filled it, laughter, conversations, footsteps, were gone. In their place, there was only stillness. I would sometimes walk from one room to another, not because I needed to, but because sitting in one place for too long made the silence feel louder. Every room held memories, but instead of bringing comfort, those memories began to feel like reminders of a life that no longer existed. There were times when I would sit by the window for hours, watching the world outside continue as if nothing had changed. People walked by, cars passed, life moved forward, but inside the house, time felt frozen. It was as though everything had stopped the moment he left, leaving me behind in a space that no longer felt alive. Even the nights became harder to bear. Darkness would settle in, and the quiet would become even more intense. Without his presence, the house felt larger, emptier, almost unfamiliar. I would lie awake, listening to the stillness, wishing for even the smallest sound to break it. But nothing came. Over time, I began to realize that it wasn't just the house that had changed. It was the feeling within it. What was once a home filled with love had turned into a place that reflected my loneliness. The walls still stood strong. The rooms were still beautiful. But without the warmth we once shared, it no longer felt like the home I had known for so many years. After my husband passed away, I believed that even though I had lost him, I still had my children. I held on to that thought as a source of comfort, telling myself that I was not completely alone. In the beginning, they came to visit, but something about them felt different. It was not immediate, not something I could clearly explain, but slowly I began to notice small changes in the way they spoke, the way they looked at me, and the way they behaved in my presence. At first, I ignored those feelings. I told myself they were just dealing with their own grief, that everyone processes loss differently. I tried to be understanding, to give them space, to believe that things would return to normal with time. But as the days passed, those small changes became more noticeable, more difficult to ignore. The warmth that once existed between us began to fade. Their visits became shorter, their conversations more distant. They no longer sat with me the way they used to, no longer shared stories or asked about my day. There was a certain coldness in their tone, a lack of patience that I had never seen before. I found myself trying harder to keep the conversation going, asking questions, hoping to feel that connection again, but it was no longer the same. There were moments when I would look at them and wonder what had changed. These were the same children I had raised with love, the same ones I had cared for through every stage of their lives. I had given them my time, my energy, my heart, without ever expecting anything in return. And yet now, when I needed them the most, there was a distance between us that I could not understand. I began to feel like I was no longer a priority in their lives. It wasn't something they said directly, but it was something I could feel. The way they checked the time during visits, the way they seemed distracted, the way they avoided deeper conversations. It felt as though being with me had become a responsibility rather than something they truly wanted. That realization was painful in a way I had never experienced before. Losing my husband had already left a deep emptiness in my heart, but seeing this change in my children added another layer of loneliness. It made me question everything, made me wonder where things had gone wrong, or if perhaps this was simply the way life changes people over time. I held on to hope for as long as I could, believing that this distance was temporary, that one day they would return to the loving children I once knew. But deep inside, I could feel that something had shifted, something that might never go back to the way it was. As time passed, the change in my children became clearer, more direct, and impossible to ignore. What once felt like distance slowly turned into something much more painful. Their visits, when they happened, were no longer about sitting with me or sharing a moment together. Instead, the conversations began to revolve around things that had nothing to do with love or care. They started asking questions, but not the kind a mother hopes to hear. There were no gentle words, no concern about how I was feeling, no effort to understand the loneliness I was living with. Instead, their focus shifted toward money, toward property, toward everything my husband had left behind. At first, the questions seemed casual, almost hidden within normal conversation, but over time, they became more direct, more persistent. I remember sitting there listening to them talk about bank accounts, documents, ownership, as if I were not even part of the conversation. It felt strange, almost unreal, to hear my own children speak in such a way. The same voices that once called me with love were now filled with a different kind of urgency, one that had nothing to do with me as their mother. I tried to tell myself that maybe they were just trying to manage things, to take responsibility after their father's passing. But the way they spoke, the way they looked around the house, the way they focused on what could be taken or controlled slowly revealed the truth. This was not about care or responsibility. It was about possession. They began to suggest things that made me uncomfortable, asking me to sign papers, to transfer control, to make decisions quickly. There was a pressure in their words, a sense that they wanted everything settled as soon as possible. I felt cornered at times, unsure of how to respond, unsure of how my own children had reached a point where they saw me as someone standing between them and what they wanted. The conversations became heavier, filled with tension and unspoken conflict. What hurt the most was not just what they were asking for, but what they were no longer offering. There was no warmth, no reassurance, no sense of family. It felt as though the love that once existed had been replaced by something cold and distant. sitting there, listening to them speak about wealth as if it mattered more than anything else, I realized something that broke my heart in a way I had never felt before. I was no longer the center of their concern. The bond we once shared had been overshadowed by something else, something that had quietly taken its place and changed everything between us. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly. The distance between us turned into something final. The tension that had been building during our conversations eventually reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. What once felt like a family began to feel like a place of conflict, where every interaction carried a weight I could no longer bear. There were arguments, quiet at first, but filled with meaning. Words were spoken that I never thought I would hear from my own children. The respect that once existed between us seemed to disappear, replaced by frustration and impatience. I tried to remain calm, to remind them that I was still their mother, that this home was not just a place or an asset, but a life filled with memories. But my words no longer reached them the way they once did. They became more insistent, more determined to take control of everything my husband had left behind. It felt as though they were no longer willing to wait, no longer willing to consider my feelings. In their eyes, I could see a sense of urgency that made me feel like I was standing in the way of something they believed belonged to them. I felt powerless in those moments, not because I didn't have the strength to speak, but because I never imagined I would have to defend myself against my own children. The emotional weight of it all was overwhelming. It wasn't just about property or money. It was about the realization that the bond we once shared had been replaced by something I no longer recognized. And then, just as quietly as everything had changed, they began to disappear. The visits stopped. The calls became less frequent until they stopped completely. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and I found myself waiting for something that never came. I would sit with my phone nearby, hoping to hear it ring, hoping to see their names appear on the screen. But the silence remained. The absence they left behind was different from the loneliness I had felt before. This was not just about missing someone. It was about being left behind, about being forgotten by the very people I had given everything to. The house became even quieter, not just because my husband was gone, but because my children had chosen to walk away as well. In the end, I was left with the truth I never wanted to accept, that sometimes the people you love the most can become strangers, and the place that once felt like a home can turn into a reminder of everything you have lost. Now, my days pass in a quiet routine that feels the same from morning to night. I wake up early, often before the sun rises, not because I have something important to do, but because sleep no longer stays with me the way it used to. The silence of the house greets me again, just as it does every day, and I sit there for a while, trying to gather the strength to begin another day that feels so empty. I move slowly through the rooms, sometimes without any real purpose, just to feel that I am still here, still part of this space that once meant so much to me. Everything around me remains the same, the furniture, the decorations, the view from the windows, but none of it brings comfort anymore. It feels like I am living inside a memory, surrounded by things that belong to a life that no longer exists. There are moments when I sit by the window and watch the world outside. People walk by busy with their lives, talking, laughing, moving forward. Cars pass, the city continues to breathe with energy, and yet inside this house, everything feels still. Time moves differently here, slowly, quietly, almost as if it has forgotten me too. I often find myself holding on to small habits from the past, setting the table as if someone might join me, pausing as if I expect to hear a voice from another room, or looking at the door when I hear the slightest sound. These are not things I plan to do. They happen on their own, as if a part of me still believes that something might change, that someone might return. But as the day turns into evening, and the evening into night, that hope slowly fades again. The house grows darker, the silence becomes deeper, and I am left alone with my thoughts. There is no laughter to fill the rooms, no conversations to break the quiet, no presence to make this place feel alive. What makes it harder is knowing that everything I once had is still here, but it no longer holds the same meaning. The luxury that once felt like a blessing now feels empty without someone to share it with. The beautiful surroundings, the comfort, the space, all of it feels incomplete, as if something essential is missing from it all. I have come to understand that loneliness is not just about being alone. It is about feeling unseen, unheard, and forgotten. It is about sitting in a place filled with memories and realizing that those moments will never return. And in this quiet life that I now live, surrounded by everything except love, I have learned that the absence of connection can turn even the most beautiful life into something that feels painfully incomplete. In the end, life is not about money, property, or how much wealth we leave behind. One day, all of it stays right where it is, but people don't. The ones who loved you, who raised you, who gave you everything, they slowly fade away, waiting for something as simple as your time and care. Don't let it be too late. Because when love is replaced by silence, no amount of wealth can ever fill that emptiness. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss stories that remind us what truly matters in life.